Hello again. Today I'll be making a German dessert called Zwetschgendatschi. It's kind of like a plum cake slash tart type dish. I'll be weighing my ingredients today, and I started out by weighing my plums because I was pretty sure I didn't have the right amount. That was correct. The recipe calls for 1 kilogram and I had significantly less than that, and when I started cutting them, I also realized that one of them was not very good looking. So I kind of adjusted what I made here based on the amount of plums that I had, percentage-wise. You can do the same thing if you don't have the right amount of ingredients, but I'll be verbalizing the ingredient amounts that the recipe calls for and not what I actually did. Anyways, here I am cutting the plums, and basically I find the easiest way to do this is to cut along the pit on either side first, and then cut off the little edges that aren't quite perfect slices. And then I'm going to slice the nice halve-looking bits of the plum so that we have beautiful plum slices to decorate the top of our Zwetschgendatschi with. Then we just do the same thing for all of the plums that we're going to be using today. And there's a shot of that bad plum that I mentioned earlier. It was very bruised and a little bit gross looking on the inside, but I was able to reuse part of it at least. We're starting with 150 grams of butter, 100 grams of sugar, 1 tablespoon of vanilla sugar, which you can either buy at any kind of German deli, or you can make it yourself like I did by just putting some used vanilla beans in a jar with sugar and letting it kind of sit for a couple months until the flavor is infused in the sugar. The sugar isn't really soft anymore, so I had to use a knife to loosen it up in order to measure it. You might come into that issue as well if you use my method. Now that I've got my sugars, I'm adding it to the butter, and we're going to mix it together until it's creamy. I decided my hand mixer would be the easiest way to do this. Don't forget to soften your butter ahead of time. It makes this step way easier. Next up, I'll be grabbing my flour and weighing out 500 grams. Of course, I was at the very end of a bag, as I always am, so I had to get a new bag of flour. There it is. That big boy should last me for a while, I hope. I added in 2 teaspoons of baking powder to my flour. Now I'll add 2 eggs, or in this case 1 egg, to my butter-sugar mixture. Mix that up together. And then I'll incorporate my flour and baking powder mixture into the main mix slowly. The dough is quite crumbly, so I grabbed a spatula, got it off of the mixer, and tried to mix it together just a little bit with the spatula, scraping down the sides of the bowl before finishing off with the hand mixer. I spread around just a little bit of vegetable oil to help with baking and make sure that the Zwetschgendatschi doesn't get stuck. So I finished off the dough kind of with my hand, and then we're going to pat it into our baking dish. Usually you're going to make this in a pretty large sheet pan, but because I approximately halved the recipe, I decided to do this in a pie pan. The crust was a bit thicker than it normally is. You usually want it to be maybe ½ an inch thick at the bottom. And then I also created a small little ridge on the edge to keep the plum juices inside the crust as much as possible. Now that that's done, you can just artistically lay out your plum slices on the whole thing. You want to cover up as much of the crust as you can, except for that little lip around the edge. You want the middle to be completely covered in plums, no gaps as much as possible. made this nice little circular ring and then kind of tucked the plums under so it looked like an infinity loop. And then I placed the rest of mine on the inside, and it turned out into a nice little rose shape, which was totally intentional and not a happy accident. Sometimes things just work out beautifully, and it's great. I had a couple more small pieces that I used to fill in any holes on the top of the cake. Time to bake for 30 to 40 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. The last step is to sprinkle with cinnamon sugar. Gives it a nice sweet flavor on the top. I probably used a little too much, but it's up to you how much you want to use. And there we have it, a completed Zwetschgendatschi. Serve with homemade whipped cream if you feel like, and enjoy.